Alright, so I'm gonna start by saying that I'm not someone who normally does stuff like this. I'm a pretty average guy, 25 years old, live alone in a small apartment, and work at a dead-end IT job that barely pays the bills. I spend most of my free time online, like a lot of people these days. I'll admit I'm a bit of a tech geek. I'm into hacking, coding, and all that underground stuff. Not in a criminal way, just in the I want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes kind of way. So, about 3 months ago, I was bored out of my mind and decided to dive into the dark web. I'd been there a few times before, just out of curiosity. You can find some seriously messed up stuff if you know where to look. But that night, I stumbled onto something different, something that's been haunting me ever since. It started out normal enough. I was browsing through random forums, not looking for anything in particular, when I came across a thread titled, "The Object, Connect with Them." The post had almost no replies, and the ones that were there seemed like they were written by bots or trolls, but the title caught my attention. I don't know why, but something about it just drew me in. It was like a compulsion. I had to click on it. The thread was a mess of garbled text, weird symbols, and broken links. But after scrolling down, I found one link that was still active. It was labeled The Signal. I don't know what possessed me to click on it, but I did. It took me to a page that looked like it was straight out of the early 2000s, all basic HTML and terrible design. There was a single image on the page, a black and white photo of a strange object. It was small, maybe the size of a fist, and looked like it was made out of some kind of dark metallic material. It was covered in these intricate, almost organic-looking carvings, like veins or tentacles wrapping around it. The longer I stared at it, the more uneasy I felt. Below the image, there was a short description in broken English. The object is key. The object is gateway. If you see, you will connect. And then, there was a download link. Now, I'm not an idiot. I know better than to download random shit off the dark web, but something about this, it was like I didn't have a choice. My hand moved on its own, and before I knew it, the file was on my computer. It was just a simple zip file, not even 1 MB in size. I ran a virus scan on it first, and it came up clean. Against my better judgment, I unzipped it. Inside was a single video file. No title, just a string of random letters and numbers. I hesitated for a second, then double-clicked it. The video was grainy, like it was shot on an old camcorder. It showed a dark room, lit only by a single flickering bulb. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table was the object. The camera zoomed in on it, slowly, until the object filled the entire frame. The carvings on it seemed to pulse, almost like they were alive. Then, the video cut to black. For a few seconds there was nothing. No sound, no image, just darkness. And then, the screen lit up with a flash of white light. A high-pitched sound, almost like a scream, blared through my speakers, and I instinctively ripped off my headphones. The sound continued, louder and louder, until it felt like it was drilling into my skull. I scrambled to turn down the volume, but nothing worked. The sound kept rising, and the screen was filled with static, flashing in sync with the noise. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The screen went black again, and the room was silent. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were shaking. I wanted to close the video, to delete it, but I couldn't move. It was like I was paralyzed, trapped in my own body. That's when the video came back on. The camera was in the same room, but now the object was glowing. A faint, eerie light was emanating from the carvings, casting strange shadows on the walls. The camera started to shake, like whoever was holding it was terrified. And then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared in the frame. It was a man, but there was something wrong with him. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were completely black. No pupils, no whites, just pure black. He stared directly into the camera, and for a moment, I swear he was staring right at me. My screen started to glitch, the image distorting and warping, but his eyes stayed perfectly in focus. He opened his mouth, and I thought he was going to speak, but instead, this horrible wet gurgling sound came out. It was like he was choking on something thick and viscous. And then the screen cut to black again. I sat there, staring at the dark screen, trying to process what the hell I had just seen. My computer was frozen, completely unresponsive. I had to do a hard shutdown to get it to turn off. Even after I unplugged it, I could still hear that high-pitched sound in the back of my mind, like it had burned itself into my brain. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, staring at the blank screen, trying to convince myself that it was just a messed up video. Some kind of sick prank. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I could feel it. Something had changed. It was like the air in my apartment was thicker, heavier. I felt like I was being watched, like there was something just outside my field of vision, waiting for me to let my guard down. The next morning, I tried to forget about it. I deleted the file, ran every virus scan I could think of, and even considered wiping my hard drive just to be safe. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That's when the nightmares started. At first, they were just flashes of the object, the carvings twisting and writhing in the dark. But then they got worse. I started seeing that man, the one from the video, standing at the foot of my bed, his black eyes staring down at me. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, and the feeling of being watched would be stronger than ever. A few nights ago, I woke up to find my door wide open. I'm dead certain I locked it before I went to bed. But there it was, just swinging open. I checked the whole apartment, but nothing was out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been in there with me. Last night was the worst. I didn't even make it to bed before it started. I was sitting on my couch, trying to watch some mindless TV to distract myself, when the power went out. My apartment was plunged into darkness, and in the silence, I heard it. A low, rumbling noise, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I froze, listening. The sound was coming from the hallway, just outside my apartment. I got up, moving as quietly as I could, and pressed my ear to the door. The noise was getting louder, closer. I backed away, heart pounding, and grabbed the heaviest thing I could find. A baseball bat I kept for protection. The noise stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, bat raised, and waited. There was a moment of complete silence, and then the doorknob started to turn. My heart was in my throat. The door creaked open, inch by inch, until I could see the dark hallway beyond. And then, the lights flickered back on. The door was closed. The hallway was empty, but the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I knew without a doubt that whatever was out there wasn't human. It wasn't something I could fight off with a bat. I don't know what to do. I haven't slept in days, and I'm starting to see things out of the corner of my eye. Shadows moving, shapes that shouldn't be there. The air feels thicker, like it's pressing down on me, suffocating me. I keep thinking about that object, the carvings, the way they seem to pulse and move on their own. I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared that if I do, I won't open them again. All right? So I wasn't planning on updating this so soon, but things have gotten worse, way worse. I can't tell if this is even real anymore or if I'm just losing my mind. But I need to get this out there. Maybe someone will know what's happening to me, or at least be able to tell me I'm not alone. After that night, I didn't leave my apartment for days. I called in sick to work and just stayed inside, too afraid to go out. I kept all the lights on, and I slept during the day, if you can even call it sleep, because the thought of being awake in the dark terrified me. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape that feeling of being watched. It was like there was something in the apartment with me, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to show itself. I tried to distract myself with work, video games, anything, but I couldn't focus. I'd catch myself staring at the screen, not really seeing it, just feeling that cold, creeping dread wash over me. A few days after the power outage, things took a turn for the worse. I was on my computer, trying to research anything that might explain what I'd seen. Urban legends, paranormal forums, even alien conspiracy theories. I wasn't finding much, just the usual crazy stuff, but it was enough to keep me occupied. That's when my computer started acting up. It was subtle at first, small glitches like the mouse cursor moving on its own or a web page taking too long to load, but then the screen went black, just like when I watched that video. My stomach dropped. I tried to reboot, but nothing happened. The screen stayed dark, but I could still hear the computer running, the fans whirring loudly, almost like they were struggling against something. And then, the screen flashed back on. But instead of my desktop, I was looking at a live feed from a camera. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The image was shaky, grainy, like it was being filmed on some low-quality camera. The camera was moving through a hallway, and the walls were covered in something dark and slimy, like tar. There was a low humming noise in the background, almost like a chant, but I couldn't make out the words. As the camera moved forward, the hallway started to twist and warp, the walls bending inward, as if the space was alive and breathing. I could hear something in the background. Footsteps, maybe, or something dragging along the floor. The camera kept moving, getting closer and closer to whatever was making that noise. And then, the camera stopped in front of a door. It was a door I recognized instantly because it was my door. The same shitty, cheap wood with the peeling paint, the same worn-out doormat I'd been meaning to replace. My heart started pounding in my chest. This was live. This was happening right now. I bolted out of my chair and ran to the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the doorknob. I flung it open, ready to confront whatever was out there, but the hallway was empty. There was no camera, no shadowy figure, nothing. Just the same old, dimly lit hallway with that weird flickering bulb at the end. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of what the hell just happened. When I finally went back to my computer, the screen was back to normal. No more live feed, no more glitching. It was like nothing had happened, but I knew it had. I could still hear that humming noise, faint and distant, like it was coming from somewhere deep below me. I tried to ignore it, to push it out of my mind, but it was there, gnawing away at my sanity. That night, the nightmares came back, worse than before. I was in the same twisted hallway from the video, the walls closing in on me, that thick, tar-like substance dripping from the ceiling, the floor, everywhere. I could barely move, my feet sticking to the ground like it was trying to pull me under. I heard that gurgling sound again, the same one from the video, but this time it was louder, closer. I turned around, and there he was, the man with the black eyes. He was standing right behind me, his face twisted into this grotesque smile, his mouth hanging open, leaking that same thick black substance. He reached out for me, and I tried to run, but I couldn't move. I was stuck, frozen in place, as he got closer and closer. His hand was inches from my face, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. But the worst part? When I sat up, I realized my door was open again. I'm positive I locked it before I went to bed. I even double-checked it because I was so freaked out. But there it was, wide open, just like before. And there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. There were footprints in the hallway, leading from my door all the way to the end of the hall, where the light bulb was flickering. They weren't human footprints, though. They were too large, too misshapen, like something with claws had walked through there. I couldn't stay there. I grabbed my keys, threw on some clothes, and left. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get out of that apartment, away from whatever was happening to me. I ended up driving around for hours, too scared to go back home. Eventually, I pulled into a 24-hour diner. I must have looked like a complete wreck because the waitress kept giving me these worried looks. I ordered a coffee, but I didn't drink it. I just sat there, staring at the table, trying to make sense of everything. I thought about going to the police, but what would I even tell them? That I watched a cursed video on the dark web, and now I'm being haunted by some kind of... I don't even know what. After a few hours, I finally worked up the courage to go back. The sun was starting to come up, and I figured whatever was happening would stop in the daylight. That's how it usually works in the movies, right? When I got back to my apartment, everything seemed normal. The footprints were gone, the door was closed, and the weird humming noise had stopped. For a brief moment, I thought maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was just sleep-deprived and freaking out over nothing. But then I checked my computer. There was a new file on my desktop. I didn't put it there, and I sure as hell didn't download anything after that first video. But there it was, staring at me like some kind of sick joke. The file name was just a string of numbers, but the format was the same as the first one. My hands were shaking as I clicked on it. Part of me wanted to just delete it, to get rid of it and pretend none of this ever happened. But I couldn't. I had to know what was in it. The video started with a black screen again, just like the last one. But this time, there was no camera feed, no hallway. Just that same high-pitched noise, getting louder and louder until it felt like my eardrums were going to burst. I tried to turn the volume down, but my mouse wouldn't respond. I couldn't do anything except watch. The screen flickered, and suddenly I was looking at a different scene. It was a close-up of the object from the first video, but it looked different now. The carvings were glowing, pulsating, almost like they were alive. And then, the camera pulled back, and I saw it wasn't just the object. There was something else in the frame, something massive and formless, covered in the same black, tar-like substance. It was moving, shifting, like it was trying to take shape. And then, out of the darkness, a face emerged. It was the man from the video, but his face was distorted, twisted into something that barely resembled a human. His eyes were black holes, and his mouth was open in a silent scream, his teeth long and jagged. He reached out toward the camera, his fingers stretching and bending in unnatural ways, until they filled the entire screen. And then the video ended, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the dark screen. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm being sucked into something I can't escape from. I can't sleep. I can't think. And I'm terrified of what might happen next. Every time I close my eyes, I see that face. Those black, empty eyes staring back at me. I'm starting to wonder if maybe that first video wasn't just some random dark web prank. Maybe it was a trap, a way to pull people into whatever this is. Maybe it wasn't just a video. Maybe it was a signal, and now that I've seen it, there's no way out. After that last video, I was done. I couldn't take it anymore. I unplugged my computer, threw it in a closet, and just sat in the dark for hours, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. My apartment felt like it was closing in on me, like the walls were alive, watching me, waiting for me to make a move. It's hard to explain, but the air in here is different now. Heavier, almost suffocating. I've been keeping the windows open, trying to get some fresh air, but it doesn't help. That feeling of dread, of something being in here with me, won't go away. I decided I needed to get out of the apartment. Staying cooped up in there wasn't doing me any good, and I was starting to lose my grip on reality. I packed a bag, grabbed my car keys, and headed out. I didn't have a plan, just this overwhelming need to be anywhere but there. As I was driving, I started to feel a little better. The further I got from my apartment, the more that oppressive feeling started to lift. I didn't have a destination in mind, so I just drove aimlessly, letting the roads take me wherever they wanted. It was almost like I was trying to outrun whatever was happening to me. Like, if I could just keep moving, it wouldn't be able to catch up. I ended up in a small town a few hours away. It was the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and the only thing open that late at night was a 24-hour gas station. I pulled in, filled up the tank, and grabbed a coffee from the sad-looking convenience store attached to it. The guy behind the counter was old, probably in his 70s, and he gave me this weird look when I walked in. I must have looked like hell, all disheveled and sleep-deprived. He didn't say anything, though, just rang me up and handed me my change. As I was walking out, he finally spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "You look like you've seen a ghost, kid," he said, his eyes narrowing like he was trying to read my mind. I forced a smile, mumbled something about not getting much sleep, and got out of there as fast as I could. The whole interaction left me feeling uneasy, like he knew something I didn't. I decided to drive around a bit more before finding a motel to crash at. I wasn't ready to go back to my apartment yet, and I figured I could use some time to clear my head. That's when things got really weird. As I was driving down this empty stretch of road, my car radio started picking up static. I hadn't touched the dial, but the station I was listening to just cut out, replaced by that familiar, high-pitched noise, the same one from the videos. My hands started shaking, and I tried to turn the radio off, but the knob wouldn't budge. The static kept getting louder, drowning out everything else, until it felt like it was vibrating through my entire body. I pulled over to the side of the road, trying to get a grip, when the radio suddenly switched from static to a voice. But it wasn't just any voice. It was mine. The voice on the radio was repeating the last few things I had said to the old man in the gas station. But it wasn't just an echo or a recording. It was like my voice had been twisted, distorted, turned into something inhuman. It kept repeating those same words over and over, getting slower and deeper with each repetition, until it was nothing but a guttural growl. I killed the engine and ripped the keys out of the ignition, but the radio kept going. The voice morphed into something else, a language I didn't recognize, harsh, guttural sounds that seemed to reverberate inside my skull. It was like the voice was speaking directly to me, bypassing my ears and going straight into my brain. I could feel it, like a physical presence, clawing at the inside of my head. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The radio went dead. The car was silent, and I was left sitting there, heart racing, drenched in sweat. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to get the hell out of there, but I was terrified that if I started driving again, the voice would come back. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed with fear, but eventually I forced myself to start the car and keep driving. I didn't care where I ended up, as long as it was far away from that spot. I found a cheap motel a few miles down the road and checked in. The place was a dump, but I didn't care. I just needed somewhere to crash, somewhere that wasn't my apartment. But the moment I walked into the room, I knew something was wrong. The air was thick, heavy, like the atmosphere in my apartment had followed me there. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was in there with me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the TV, trying to distract myself with some mindless late-night infomercial, but the screen started glitching, just like my computer had. The image flickered, distorting into static, and that same high-pitched noise started up again. I grabbed the remote and turned the TV off, but the noise didn't stop. It was coming from somewhere else now. From the motel room's phone? The damn thing was ringing, even though I hadn't heard it start. The sound was muffled, almost like it was underwater, but I knew it was that same high-pitched frequency, the same one from the videos. My whole body was shaking as I picked up the receiver. I didn't want to, but it was like I had no choice. My hand moved on its own, and before I knew it, the phone was at my ear. There was silence on the other end. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own ragged breathing. And then I heard it. A voice, faint, almost like a whisper, but I recognized it immediately. It was the man from the video, the one with the black eyes. His voice was low, almost soothing, but there was something else behind it. Something sinister, like he was trying to lull me into a false sense of security. "You've seen it now," he whispered, his voice crackling through the receiver. "You're connected." I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. My entire body was locked in place, paralyzed with fear. "You can't run," the voice continued, the whisper growing louder, more distorted. "You can't hide. We are one now. Forever." The line went dead, and I dropped the phone, stumbling back onto the bed. My head was spinning, and I could feel that pressure building in my skull again, like something was trying to force its way inside. I don't know how long I stayed in that motel room, but eventually, I managed to pull myself together enough to leave. I drove back home, not because I wanted to, but because I had nowhere else to go. I was too scared to stay in the motel, and too scared to keep driving aimlessly. The sun was starting to rise, and for some reason, that gave me a small sense of relief. Maybe, I thought, this whole nightmare would stop once I got back home. But when I walked into my apartment, I knew that wasn't going to happen. The air was heavier than ever. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed darker, deeper. I felt like I was being watched from every angle, like whatever had been chasing me had finally caught up. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's like my apartment isn't just a place anymore. It's like it's become part of something else, something I can't escape from. I've tried leaving again, but every time I do, I end up right back here, like the outside world doesn't exist for me anymore. And that voice, his voice, it's still with me. I hear it every time I try to sleep, whispering in the dark, telling me things I don't want to hear. Sometimes I see him too, out of the corner of my eye, just standing there, watching me with those empty black eyes. I think I've made a terrible mistake. I think that video, that object, it wasn't just some random thing I found on the dark web. It was a doorway, a way to connect with something. Something that isn't human, something that wants me to be a part of it. And now, I think it's succeeded. I'm going to try to get some sleep, if I can. But I don't know if I'll be able to. I don't know if I'll ever be able to sleep again. I'll update if I can, but I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this up. I'm scared that one day I'll close my eyes, and when I open them again, I won't be me anymore. I'll be whatever it wants me to be. If you're reading this, please, stay away from the dark web. Don't go looking for things you don't understand, because once you find them, they'll never let you go. I didn't think things could get worse, but I was wrong. So wrong. I haven't updated in a while because, honestly, I don't know how to put into words what's been happening. But I'm going to try because I need to get this out before it's too late. After that last night, I gave up on sleep entirely. I couldn't risk it, not with that voice creeping into my dreams, twisting them into something that felt more real than my waking life. So I stayed up for as long as I could, chugging energy drinks, drowning myself in caffeine, doing anything to keep my eyes open. But it didn't help. The longer I stayed awake, the more the lines between reality and whatever this is started to blur. I started seeing things. At least, I hope they were hallucinations. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the corners of my vision, shadows that didn't belong, faces staring at me from the walls. Every time I'd turn to look, they'd vanish. But I knew they were still there, just waiting for me to let my guard down. And then there were the noises. God, the noises. At first, it was just that same high-pitched whine, barely audible, like a mosquito buzzing around my head. But it kept getting louder, more insistent, until it was all I could hear. It felt like it was coming from inside my skull, drilling into my brain, driving me closer to the edge. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was when the voices started to talk to me. It started as whispers, soft and indistinct, like a conversation happening in the next room. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I knew it wasn't good. The tone was wrong, low, guttural, filled with a kind of malice I'd never heard before. They were talking about me, I was sure of it. But every time I tried to focus, to catch a word or phrase, they'd fade away, leaving me with nothing but that awful buzzing noise. And then, one night, they got louder. I was sitting in my living room, trying to distract myself with some mindless TV, when the voices started up again. But this time, they weren't whispers. They were clear, distinct, and coming from all around me. "You can't hide," one of them said, its voice a low, raspy hiss. "We see you. We see everything." Another voice joined in, this one deeper, more menacing. "You belong to us now. There's no escape." I jumped up, frantically looking around the room, but there was no one there. Just me and the shadows that seemed to grow darker with each passing second. "Get out of my head!" I screamed, clutching my ears, but it didn't help. The voices just laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through my apartment. "We're already inside," they whispered, their voices overlapping, blending into one. "You let us in." I don't know what happened after that. The next thing I remember, I was lying on the floor, my head pounding, my throat raw from screaming. The TV was off, the room was dark, and I was alone. But the voices, they were still there, whispering in the back of my mind, like a constant, never-ending loop. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get out of that apartment, had to get away from whatever was happening to me. So, I grabbed my keys, threw on some clothes, and bolted out the door. I didn't have a plan, didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. But no matter how far I drove, no matter how fast I went, I couldn't escape it. The voices followed me, growing louder, more insistent. I started seeing things on the road, figures standing on the side, watching me with those same black eyes, their faces twisted into that grotesque smile. I'd swerved to avoid them, only to realize there was nothing there, just empty roads stretching out before me. At one point, I drove past a woman standing on the shoulder, her back to me. I almost didn't notice her, but something about the way she was standing, completely still, too still, made me slow down. As I passed, she turned her head to look at me, and my blood ran cold. It was the same woman I'd seen in my dreams. Pale skin, dark hair matted with something wet, and those eyes, those endless black eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. Her mouth twisted into a wide grin, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth, and she raised her hand, pointing directly at me. I floored it, speeding away as fast as I could, but I could still feel her eyes on me, could still see that smile in my mind, like it had been burned into my retinas. I don't know how long I drove, but eventually, I ended up back in the same small town I'd been in before. It was like I was being pulled there, like something was guiding me back. I found myself parked outside that same gas station, the old man from before standing behind the counter, watching me with those same knowing eyes. I didn't go inside this time. I couldn't face him, couldn't deal with the questions he might ask. I just sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm the pounding in my chest. And that's when I heard it. The same low, humming noise from the video. But this time, it wasn't coming from the car or the radio. It was coming from inside me. I could feel it, vibrating through my bones, resonating with something deep inside me. It was like the sound was a part of me now, like it had wormed its way into my very being. I don't remember much after that. I think I blacked out, because the next thing I knew, I was back in my apartment, sitting on the floor, staring at the object. Yeah, the object. The one from the video. The one I'd never seen in person before. But there it was, sitting on the floor in front of me, the carvings glowing faintly in the darkness. I don't know how it got there, don't know if it was ever not there, but as I stared at it, I felt that same pull, that same compulsion I'd felt when I first saw it on the dark web. It was like it was calling to me, whispering in that strange guttural language, telling me to pick it up, to hold it, to embrace it. And I did. I don't know why, but I did. My hand moved on its own, reaching out, fingers brushing against the cold metallic surface. The moment I touched it, the humming stopped, replaced by a deafening silence that filled the room, pressing down on me from all sides. And then, the carvings started to move. They writhed and twisted, the lines shifting and changing, forming shapes that made no sense, patterns that hurt to look at. But I couldn't look away. I was mesmerized, trapped, like a moth drawn to a flame. The object started to pulse, a faint light emanating from within, growing brighter with each beat until it was almost blinding. And then, without warning, the light exploded outward, filling the room with a blinding white flash. I screamed, dropping the object, and stumbled back, covering my eyes. But the light was inside my head now, burning, searing into my brain. I could feel it, like a physical presence, twisting and turning, reshaping me from the inside out. And that's when I heard it. Not the voices, not the humming, but a single word, spoken in that same deep guttural tone. Welcome. I don't know what happened after that. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the floor, my head pounding, the object gone. But the room was different. The air was heavier, thicker, and the shadows seemed to move on their own, twisting and writhing like they were alive. And then I realized I wasn't alone. There was something else in the room with me. I could feel it, could hear it breathing, feel its presence pressing down on me from all sides. But I couldn't see it, not at first. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shape, tall and formless, standing in the corner of the room, watching me. It was dark, so dark that it seemed to absorb all the light around it, leaving nothing but an empty void. But I could feel its eyes on me, those same black eyes that had haunted my dreams, my thoughts, my every waking moment. I tried to move, to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear, by the overwhelming presence of this thing. And then, it spoke. "You are ours now," it said, its voice a low, rumbling growl that shook the very walls of my apartment. "You have been chosen." I don't know what happened next. I must have blacked out, because when I came to, the room was empty. The object was gone, and the sun was rising outside my window, but the air was still thick. The shadows still moved, and I knew, deep down, I wasn't alone. I can't escape this. I don't even know if I'm still me anymore. That thing, whatever it is, it's inside me now. I can feel it, crawling under my skin, whispering in the back of my mind, telling me things I don't want to hear. I'm scared. I don't know what's happening to me, but I know it's not good. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, how much longer I can fight it. If anyone out there is reading this, please, don't look for the object. Don't go on the dark web. Don't try to connect with whatever this is, because once you do, there's no going back. After that last encounter, I knew I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. The place was poisoned, tainted by whatever that thing was that had invaded my life. I could feel it in the walls, in the air, in every breath I took. The shadows were always shifting now, moving when I wasn't looking, and the voices had become a constant, a background noise that I couldn't shut out no matter how hard I tried. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I packed a bag with whatever I could grab and just left, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. What would have been the point? That thing, whatever it wasn't bound by locks or walls. It was inside me now, part of me, and no matter how far I ran, it would still be there, whispering in the dark corners of my mind. I drove until I couldn't anymore, until my eyes were burning and my hands were trembling so bad I could barely keep the car on the road. I ended up in some rundown motel off a highway, miles from anywhere I'd ever been. It didn't matter where I was going. I just needed to be away from that apartment, from everything that had happened. But the moment I walked into that motel room, I knew it was pointless. The air was thick with that same oppressive weight, the same sense of something watching, waiting. I could feel it, lurking just beyond the edge of my perception, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, it wouldn't go away. The first night, I tried to sleep, thinking maybe, just maybe, if I got far enough away, it would lose its hold on me. But the moment I closed my eyes, I was back in that twisted, nightmarish version of my apartment. The walls were covered in that black, tar-like substance, and the floor was slick and sticky under my feet. The shadows in the corners moved, writhing and twisting like they were alive, and I could hear the voices, louder than ever, chanting in that strange, guttural language. And then I saw him. The man with the black eyes, standing in the doorway, his mouth stretched into that horrific grin. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stared at me, those empty, soulless eyes boring into mine, filling my mind with thoughts that weren't my own. "You can't run," his voice echoed in my head, though his lips never moved. "You're already one of us." I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around me like a noose. The room was dark, the only light coming from the flickering TV in the corner, playing some old black and white movie I didn't recognize. But the moment I looked at the screen, I knew it wasn't just a movie. It was my apartment. The camera was moving through the rooms, the same warped, distorted angles as before. But this time, it was different. There was something there. Something just out of frame, moving through the shadows. I could see glimpses of it, a clawed hand here, a flash of teeth there, but it never came fully into view. The camera was getting closer, moving toward the bedroom, and I knew what was coming. I knew what I was going to see. And there it was, me, lying on the bed, asleep, completely oblivious to the thing creeping toward me. It was massive, formless, its body shifting and changing like smoke. Its eyes, those same black eyes, glowing in the dark. It reached out, its hand, if you could even call it a hand, hovering over my face. And then the screen went black. I snapped the TV off, my heart pounding in my chest, but the image was still burned into my mind. I could still feel its presence, lingering in the room with me, waiting for me to let my guard down. The next few days were a blur. I don't even remember leaving the motel. Don't remember driving or checking into the next place, or the next. All I know is that no matter where I went, it was always there, always following me, always one step ahead. The nightmares were constant, and I started to lose track of what was real and what wasn't. I'd wake up in strange places, with no memory of how I got there, and the voices were always there, getting louder, more insistent, until it felt like they were screaming inside my skull. I don't know when I realized it, but at some point it hit me. I wasn't going to escape this. It had already won. That video, that object, it was never about contacting something else. It was about letting something in, something that had been waiting, watching, for God knows how long. And now that it was here, it wasn't going to stop until it had consumed everything. I started seeing things in the mirror, things that weren't me. My reflection would twist and warp, the skin turning pale, the eyes darkening until they were nothing but empty voids. Sometimes, I'd see that man, his face where mine should be, grinning at me with that wide, unnatural smile. Other times, it was something else, something formless and monstrous, its body shifting like liquid, its eyes burning with a malevolent hunger. And then, one night, I realized I wasn't alone in the room. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, too scared to sleep, when I felt it. A presence, cold and suffocating, pressing down on me from all sides. I tried to move, but my body was frozen, paralyzed by some invisible force. I could feel something moving in the dark, something that wasn't human, something that shouldn't exist. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow. darker than the rest, standing at the foot of my bed. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. Its eyes, those same black eyes, glowing in the dark. It didn't speak, didn't move. It just stared at me, watching, waiting. And in that moment, I knew. I knew that whatever it was, whatever I had let in, it wasn't just going to take me. It was going to consume me, body and soul, until there was nothing left. I don't know how long I lay there, trapped in that bed, unable to move, unable to scream, as it watched me. But eventually I felt something inside me give way, like a dam breaking, and the voices flooded in, overwhelming me, drowning me in a sea of darkness. When I woke up, it was morning, and the room was empty. The shadow was gone, but the air was still thick with its presence, and I could feel it inside me, crawling under my skin, whispering in my mind, twisting my thoughts, my memories, everything that made me who I was. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what's real and what's not. All I know is that it's inside me now, that I've become something else, something that isn't entirely human. I can feel it, changing me, warping me, turning me into one of them. I don't have much time left. I can feel myself slipping away, losing control, becoming something I don't recognize. The voices are louder now, and sometimes I catch myself speaking in that same guttural language, words I don't understand but know are filled with malice. If you're reading this, take my advice and burn it, delete it. Get rid of anything that connects you to this story, to me. Don't try to find the object. Don't try to understand. Just forget about it, forget about everything you've read, and move on with your life. Because once you've seen it, once you've made the connection, there's no going back. It will find you, no matter where you go, no matter how far you run. And when it does, you'll become one of them too. This is my final warning, my last chance to make things right. I'm not going to fight it anymore. I'm too tired, too broken to keep resisting. I don't know what will happen when I let go, but I know it's inevitable. The end is coming. I can feel it, creeping closer with every passing second. And when it gets here, there won't be anything left of me. Only it. Goodbye.